Thousands of years ago, the land we now call Greece was not a single country. It was a collection of small cities that were almost always at war. Neighbors fought neighbors over land, power, and pride. The ground was often stained with the blood of young men. However, in the middle of this chaos, a different idea began to grow in a quiet valley. This valley was known as Olympia, a place of tall trees and green grass. In the year 776 before Christ, a small group of men gathered here for a race. It was a simple foot race, just 192 meters long. They did not know it at the time, but they were starting a tradition that would survive for over 1,000 years and change history. The leaders of the Greek cities realized that constant war was destroying their culture. They needed a way to bring people together without weapons. They created a rule called the Sacred Truce. This was a legal and religious agreement that stopped all fighting for 1 month. It allowed people to travel safely through enemy lands to reach the Valley of Olympia. The announcement of the truce was carried by special messengers. These men traveled to every corner of the Greek world, from the mountains of the north to the islands of the south. When the messengers arrived, soldiers put down their spears. The gates of the cities opened wide. For a few weeks, the fear of death was replaced by the excitement of the games. People from all levels of society began the long journey. Wealthy landowners rode on horses, while poor farmers walked for many days on dusty roads. They all shared the same goal, to see the greatest athletes prove their worth. The air in the valley began to fill with the smell of cooking fires and the sound of thousands of voices talking together. Before we continue our journey into the past, we would love to hear from you. Where are you listening to this story today? Please tell us your location in the comments below. If you enjoy these stories about history and the human spirit, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us tell more stories for adults like you. Now, let us return to ancient Greece. At the heart of the valley stood the great temple of Zeus. This was not just a sports event, it was a deeply religious moment. The Greeks believed that physical excellence was a way to honor the gods. To have a strong, fast, and healthy body was seen as a gift. The stadium was built right next to the sacred ground to show this connection. The first games were very short, lasting only 1 day. There was only one event, the short sprint. But as the years passed, the games grew in size and importance. More days were added, and more sports were introduced. The simple race became a complex festival of strength, speed, and endurance that captured the imagination of the entire ancient world. The truce was taken very seriously by everyone. If a city broke the peace during the games, they were heavily fined and banned from competing. This was a huge dishonor. It shows us how much they valued this moment of unity. In a world defined by conflict, the games were a rare light of peace that people refused to let go. The athletes who came to Olympia were not professionals like we see today. They were citizens who had to prove they were of Greek blood. They were often soldiers or farmers who spent their free time training. To participate in the games was the highest honor a man could achieve. It was a chance to make his name live forever in history. As the sun rose over the hills of the Peloponnese, the atmosphere in the valley became electric. Thousands of people slept in tents or under the stars because there were no hotels. The heat was intense and water was scarce, but nobody complained. They were waiting for the moment when the trumpet would sound to signal the start of the first event. But here is what truly matters. The games were the only time the Greeks felt like one people. Usually, they identified as Spartans, Athenians, or Corinthians. At Olympia, those labels disappeared. They were simply Greeks. This shift in mindset was the real victory of the ancient games, even before the first athlete crossed the finish line. Training for the games was not a casual activity. It was a brutal and demanding process. Every athlete was required by law to train for 10 months before the games began. The final month of training happened at Olympia itself, under the strict eyes of the judges. If an athlete was lazy or arrived late, he was immediately disqualified. These men lived on a very strict diet and followed a difficult schedule. They practiced in the heat of the day to build their endurance. They did not wear clothes or shoes. They competed completely naked. They covered their skin in olive oil and fine sand. This helped protect them from the sun and allowed their trainers to see every muscle moving. Consider the discipline required to maintain this lifestyle. There were no modern gyms or scientific equipment. They used heavy stones as weights and ran through deep sand to build leg strength. Their trainers used long sticks to hit anyone who performed a move incorrectly. It was a system built on pain, repetition, and a total desire for physical perfection. The events themselves were much more violent than modern sports. For example, the pankration was a type of combat that mixed wrestling and boxing. Almost everything was allowed, including breaking fingers or choking an opponent. Only biting and eye gouging were forbidden. Many athletes finished their matches with broken bones or worse, but they never stopped fighting until someone surrendered. Wrestling was another favorite event. In the ancient world, wrestling was seen as the ultimate test of intelligence and strength. An athlete had to throw his opponent to the ground 3 times to win. It was a game of balance and strategy. The spectators loved it because it showed how a smaller, smarter man could defeat a much larger giant. There is a significant difference between the ancient and modern games regarding the winners. Today, we celebrate the first, second, and third places. In ancient Greece, there was no silver or bronze medal. If you did not win, you were nothing. Losing was considered a deep shame that followed a man back to his home city. Because of this, the pressure was enormous. Athletes prayed to the gods for either the wreath or death. This sounds dramatic to us, but for them, it was the truth. They were not just competing for a prize. They were competing for their identity and their honor. This mindset created a level of intensity that is hard to imagine today. One famous athlete was Milo of Croton, a wrestler of incredible strength. Legends say he could carry a full-grown bull on his shoulders. He won 6 different Olympic titles over many years. His secret was simple. He started by carrying a small calf every day. As the calf grew into a bull, his strength grew with it. This is a lesson in patience. While the men competed, the women had their own festival called the Haraya. It was held at a different time and was dedicated to the goddess Hera. It consisted mostly of foot races for young women. Although it was smaller than the men's games, it showed that the desire for competition and honor was shared by everyone in the culture. The chariot races were the most dangerous and expensive events. Only the very wealthy could afford the horses and the specialized equipment. The races took place in a large arena called the Hippodrome. It was common for chariots to crash at high speeds, leading to many deaths. The owner of the horses received the prize, not the person driving the chariot, and this changed everything for the winners. When a man won at Olympia, his life was changed forever. He did not receive money at the stadium, only a crown made of olive leaves. But when he returned home, he was treated like a king. His city might tear down a part of its wall just to let him enter, showing they needed no walls with such a hero. Winners often received free meals for the rest of their lives. They were given the best seats in the theater and did not have to pay taxes. Their statues were carved in marble and placed in the center of the city. For a regular person, this was the only way to achieve a kind of immortality. Their name would be remembered for centuries. This obsession with winning reveals a lot about the human heart. We have always wanted to be the best. We have always wanted to push past our limits. The ancient athlete shows us that even without modern technology, the human spirit is capable of incredible things when it is fueled by the hope of glory and the fear of being forgotten. But we must look deeper than the sports to understand why Olympia was so special. It was a place of high culture and art. Between the races, poets would stand on the steps of the temples and read their latest works. Famous historians would tell stories of the past to huge crowds. It was an intellectual gathering as much as a physical one. The Temple of Zeus housed one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was a giant statue of the god sitting on a throne. It was over 12 meters tall and made of gold and ivory. The sight of it was so powerful that people said seeing it once would make you forget all your earthly troubles. It reminded everyone why they were there. Religion touched every part of the games. On the middle day of the festival, a massive sacrifice was made. 100 bulls were killed in honor of Zeus. The meat was then used for a giant feast for all the visitors. This shared meal was a moment of brotherhood. People from warring cities sat together and ate as one family. Artists also used the games to find inspiration. Sculptors watched the athletes closely to understand how muscles looked during movement. They wanted to capture the perfect human form in stone. Many of the famous Greek statues we see in museums today were based on the bodies of the Olympic champions. The Games helped define the very idea of beauty. Music played a role too. There were competitions for trumpet players and heralds. These men were responsible for making the loud announcements and keeping the crowd informed. The sound of the trumpet was the heartbeat of the valley, telling everyone when a race was about to start or when a new champion had been crowned. Think about the social impact of these gatherings. In a world without newspapers or the internet, Olympia was where you went to hear the news. It was where philosophers shared new ideas and where politicians made secret deals. It was the center of the Greek world for 5 days every 4 years. It was a hub of human connection. The olive crown itself was a powerful symbol. It was cut from a sacred tree near the temple using a golden knife. Though the leaves would eventually dry and turn brown, the honor they represented never faded. It showed that the most valuable things in life are often simple symbols of our hard work rather than gold or silver coins. However, the Games also had a dark side. The focus on victory was so strong that some people tried to cheat. There are stories of athletes trying to bribe the judges or the other competitors. When a cheater was caught, he was forced to pay for a bronze statue of Zeus. These statues were lined up at the entrance of the stadium. Every athlete had to walk past these statues on their way to compete. Each statue had the name of the cheater and his family carved into the base. It was a permanent reminder that a win gained by lies was not a win at all. It was a warning to everyone that honor was more important than the crown. This system of justice shows how much the Greeks valued integrity. They believed that the gods were watching every move. If you cheated, you were not just tricking the audience, you were insulting the divine. This religious fear helped keep the Games fair for a very long time. It was a community governed by shared beliefs and mutual respect. The Games also taught people about the passing of time. Every 4 years was called an Olympiad. This became the way Greeks measured their history. They didn't say 10 years ago, they said 2 Olympiads ago. The Games were the clock of their civilization. They provided a sense of rhythm and order to a chaotic world. As the final day of the festival arrived, the valley was filled with a mix of joy and sadness. The winners celebrated, and the losers began the quiet walk home. But everyone left with a sense of pride. They had been part of something larger than themselves. They had seen the best that humanity had to offer. And this changed everything about their identity. Even when they went back to fighting their wars, they carried the memory of the truce. They knew that deep down they were capable of peace. This memory stayed with them through the winters and the battles, waiting for the next time the messengers would arrive with the news of the truce. Every great story has a period of darkness, and the Olympic Games are no exception. After hundreds of years of success, the world around Greece began to change. The Roman Empire was growing in power. In the 2nd century before Christ, the Romans conquered Greece. At first, they allowed the Games to continue, but the spirit was different. The Romans did not share the same religious connection to the Games. For them, sport was often about entertainment and spectacle. They preferred gladiator fights where men fought to the death. The focus on individual excellence and the honor of the gods began to fade. The Games became more like a show and less like a sacred ritual. Corruption became more common during this time. One famous example involves the Roman Emperor Nero. He decided he wanted to compete in the Games. He entered the chariot race but fell out of his chariot and did not finish. However, the judges were so afraid of him that they declared him the winner anyway. When an emperor can win without finishing the race, the meaning of the competition is lost. The people knew the results were fake. The respect for the olive crown began to disappear. Why should an athlete train for 10 months if a powerful politician could simply buy the victory? The moral foundation of Olympia was crumbling. Then came a change in religion. As the Roman Empire became Christian, the old gods of Greece were seen as idols. The Emperor Theodosius I decided to ban all pagan festivals. In the year 39-3 after Christ, he ordered the Olympic Games to stop forever. The flame was put out, and the messengers stopped traveling. The Valley of Olympia, once the busiest place in the world, became silent. The temples were closed, and the great statue of Zeus was taken away to a different city, where it was eventually destroyed in a fire. Without the games, there was no reason for people to visit the valley. Nature began to take back the land. Over the following centuries, several natural disasters struck the region. Great earthquakes shook the ground, causing the massive stone columns of the temples to fall. Floods from the nearby rivers covered the stadium and the training grounds in layers of mud and silt. Eventually, the entire site was buried and hidden from the eyes of man. For over 1,000 years, the world forgot exactly where the games had taken place. Farmers grew crops on top of the buried stadium without knowing what lay beneath their feet. The stories of the great athletes became myths. People talked about Milo of Croton like he was a character in a fairy tale, not a real person. This loss is a powerful reminder of how fragile our culture can be. Even something as massive and important as the Olympics can be erased if we do not protect it. The ideas of the truce and the celebration of human strength were lost to the world for a very long time. It was a long winter for the Olympic spirit. However, ideas have a way of surviving even when they are buried. During the Renaissance, scholars began to read the old Greek poems again. They read about the races and the wrestlers. They started to wonder if such a thing could ever happen again. Could modern nations find a way to stop fighting and compete in peace? The question remained unanswered for a long time. The world was full of new wars and new borders. The idea of a global sports event seemed impossible and even a bit silly to many people. But the memory of that quiet valley in Greece continued to haunt the minds of dreamers who looked for a better way to live. The ruins of Olympia stayed hidden until the mid-1700s, when a group of archaeologists finally discovered the site. As they dug through the mud, they found the columns and the starting lines of the races. The discovery made headlines around the world. The physical reality of the games was back, but the spirit was still waiting for a leader. In the late 1800s, a young French nobleman named Pierre de Coubertin became obsessed with the history of Greece. He was worried about the health and the character of young people in his own time. He believed that the modern world was becoming too focused on money and machines. He wanted to bring back the ancient Greek balance of body and mind. Coubertin had a very ambitious dream. He didn't just want a local sports club. He wanted a global festival that would bring all nations together. He believed that if young people from different countries played sports together, they would be less likely to go to war as adults. It was a romantic idea, and many people laughed at him. He spent years traveling across Europe and America to find support. He met with kings, politicians, and sports leaders. He faced constant rejection. People told him that the ancient games were part of a dead religion and had no place in the modern world. They said that different nations would never agree on the rules. But Coubertin was determined. He used his own money and his social connections to organize a big meeting in Paris in 1894. He invited representatives from many countries. During this meeting, he gave a powerful speech about the future of humanity. To his surprise, the delegates agreed with him. They voted to bring the games back. The decision was made to hold the first modern Olympic Games in 1896. There was only one place that made sense for the location: Athens, Greece. The people of Greece were incredibly excited. They saw this as a chance to reconnect with their glorious past and show the world that their nation was still strong and vibrant. The challenges were enormous. Greece was not a rich country at that time, and they had very little money to build a stadium. But a wealthy businessman donated a huge amount of marble, and the people worked day and night. They reconstructed an ancient stadium that had been built hundreds of years before. It was a beautiful sight. When the opening day finally arrived, the atmosphere was magical. Over 60,000 people filled the stadium. The King of Greece stood up and declared the games open. For the first time in 1,500 years, the Olympic hymn was played. Athletes from 14 different nations stood together on the field. It was the birth of a new era. The competition was very different from the ancient world. There were now medals for the winners, silver for first place and copper for second. There were also new sports like cycling and swimming, but the most important event was the marathon. This was a new race created to honor a famous legend from Greek history. The legend told of a messenger who ran from the battlefield of Marathon to Athens to deliver news of a victory. He ran over 40 kilometers, delivered the message, and then died from exhaustion. The modern Greeks desperately wanted one of their own to win this symbolic race. It was the final event of the Games. A young Greek water carrier named Spiridon, Lewis, entered the race. He was not a professional athlete, just a simple man with a strong spirit. As he ran toward the stadium, the crowd was silent with tension. When he finally appeared at the entrance, the stadium exploded with joy. He won the race, and the Greek people felt a deep sense of pride. That moment proved that the Olympic spirit was truly alive. It wasn't just about the Greeks anymore, it was about the whole world. The Games in 1896 were a small success, but they were a success nonetheless. They showed that Coubertin's dream was possible. However, the road ahead was still going to be very difficult. The next few Olympic Games in Paris and St. Louis were disorganized and poorly attended. They were often treated as a sideshow for international fairs. People began to lose interest. Some thought the project would fail, but Coubertin refused to give up. He continued to write letters and organize committees to keep the dream moving forward. He introduced the Olympic rings as a symbol of the 5 continents coming together. He wanted a visual sign that everyone was welcome, regardless of their background or politics. This symbol is now one of the most recognized in the world. It represents the hope that even in a divided world, we can find a way to connect. Gradually, the Games began to grow. More countries joined, and more sports were added. The quality of the athletes improved as people started to train professionally. The Games survived 2 world wars, even though they had to be canceled during those times. Each time the fighting stopped, the Games came back even stronger than before. By the middle of the 20th century, the Olympics had become the biggest event on the planet. They were no longer just for a few wealthy amateurs. They were a stage where the world's greatest talents could shine. The quiet valley of Olympia was now a global village, connected by television and shared excitement. Today, when we watch the Olympic Games, we are seeing the result of 3,000 years of history. The flame that is lit at the start of every competition is still lit in the ruins of Olympia. It is carried by runners through many countries until it reaches the host city. This fire connects us directly to the ancient world. The Games have changed in many ways, of course. We now have the Winter Games and the Paralympic Games. Women compete in every event, and technology helps us measure time to the thousandth of a second. But if an ancient Greek athlete could see us today, he would still recognize the spirit of the competition. He would see the same sweat, the same nerves, and the same joy in the eyes of the winners. He would see that the human desire to be faster, higher, and stronger has not changed. We still want to push our bodies to the limit. We still want to see what is possible for a human being to achieve. The modern games also try to bring back the idea of the sacred truce. While we do not stop all wars today, the United Nations passes a resolution before every Olympics asking for peace. It is a symbolic gesture, but symbols are powerful. They remind us that there is a better way for nations to interact than with weapons. We should also reflect on the lessons these stories teach us. The ancient games showed us that peace requires effort. It doesn't just happen, it must be built. The Greeks had to agree to stop fighting and follow the rules. It required a shared commitment to something higher than their own immediate interests. The story of the decline and fall of the games teaches us about the danger of corruption. When we lose our integrity, we lose the value of our traditions. Whether in sport or in life, honesty and fairness are the only things that give our victories meaning. A win gained through cheating is a hollow shell that eventually breaks. The revival of the games by Coubertin shows us the power of a single person with a vision. He was just one man with an idea that everyone else thought was impossible. Because he refused to quit, he created a legacy that touches billions of people today. It is a reminder that we should never underestimate the impact of our dreams. When we look at the athletes today, we see people who have overcome incredible struggles. Many of them come from humble beginnings or have faced injuries and setbacks. Their stories of resilience are an inspiration to all of us. They show us that with hard work and focus, we can overcome the obstacles in our own lives. The Games are also a celebration of our diversity. In the stadium, it doesn't matter what language you speak or what your background is. What matters is your performance and your sportsmanship. This is one of the few times when the whole world focuses on what we have in common rather than what makes us different. As we move into the future, the Olympic Games will continue to face new challenges. There are always debates about politics, money, and the environment. But the core idea remains the same. The need for a shared human experience is stronger than any temporary problem. We need these moments of unity now more than ever. The Valley of Olympia is still a quiet place today, visited by thousands of tourists who want to walk on the sacred ground. When you stand in the old stadium, you can almost hear the ghosts of the ancient runners. You can feel the weight of the history that happened there. It is a place that belongs to all of us. We have traveled a long way from that first race in 776 before Christ. We have seen the games rise to glory, fall into ruin, and be reborn for a new age. This journey shows the incredible endurance of the human spirit. We are a species that loves to play, to compete, and to celebrate excellence together. So, the next time you see the 5 rings or the Olympic flame, remember where they came from. Remember the small valley in Greece and the kings who decided to stop fighting. Remember the athletes who trained in the dust and the dreamers who refused to let the tradition die. They are all part of our story. The Olympic Games are more than just a sports event. They are a mirror of our history and a window into our potential. They show us that even in a world of competition, there can be respect. They show us that even in a world of individuals, there can be a community. This is the lasting legacy of the Games. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. We hope this story has given you a new perspective on the Games and the history of our world. As you go about your day, remember the lesson of the olive crown, that our greatest achievements are the ones we reach through discipline, honor, and peace. Until next time.